A tourist snatched a medal from a royal guard's chest, thinking rules were meant to be broken. But a single step forward changed everything, and soon the crowd's applause celebrated not his audacity, but the triumph of honor over arrogance. Like and subscribe if you want to see more inspiring stories that remind us about respect, dignity, and justice. Press that notification bell to never miss our latest uploads. On a crisp autumn morning at Windsor Castle, where centuries of royal tradition hung in the air like morning mist, Royal Guard David Wilson stood at attention, his presence a living embodiment of discipline and dedication. The September breeze gently stirred the pristine plumes of his ceremonial bearskin cap, while his scarlet tunic, adorned with polished brass buttons and hard-earned medals, caught the early sunlight like flames dancing across his chest. At 29, Wilson carried himself with the bearing of someone twice his age, his clean-shaven face and steel-blue eyes reflecting years of rigorous military training. His 6'2" frame remained perfectly still, a skill honed through countless hours of practice and unwavering dedication. Each medal on his chest told a story of service, sacrifice, and honor, stories that demanded respect but never asked for it. The grand courtyard of Windsor Castle bustled with its usual morning energy. Tour groups weaved through the ancient cobblestones like streams of water, their excited chatter echoing off the centuries-old stone walls. Tour guide Lisa Moore's voice carried across the courtyard as she explained the castle's rich history to her group, her knowledge and enthusiasm adding depth to the majestic scene. Amid the sea of tourists taking photos and children pointing in wonder at the castle's towering walls, families from across the globe shared in the magic of this historic place. Amy Zhang, a young travel vlogger, carefully positioned her camera to capture the perfect shot of the guard and the castle's magnificent backdrop. John Sullivan held his son Tommy's hand, watching the boy's eyes grow wide with amazement at the sight of the Royal Guard's ceremonial uniform. The autumn air carried the sweet scent of nearby gardens and the distant toll of chapel bells, creating a perfect morning at one of Britain's most treasured landmarks. David Wilson remained motionless, his gaze fixed on an invisible point in the distance, embodying the unwavering dedication that had protected these halls for generations. Karen White, a local teacher who often brought her students on field trips to the castle, stood nearby, quietly appreciating the guard's dedication as she had done countless times before. She knew the weight of tradition these guards carried on their shoulders, the hours of training that went into each perfectly executed movement, and the pride they took in their sacred duty. The morning light continued to strengthen, casting long shadows across the courtyard's ancient stones, while Stephen Brown, a senior palace staff member, made his routine inspection of the grounds. His experienced eye noted with approval the guards' impeccable bearing and the overall smooth flow of visitors through the historic site. Tour groups came and went, cameras flashed, and children pointed in wonder, all while David Wilson maintained his unwavering vigilance. His medals gleamed in the strengthening sunlight, each one representing not just personal achievement, but the honor of service to the crown. Little did he know that one of these symbols of dedication would soon become the center of an incident that would test his training, composure, and the very principles he had sworn to uphold. As the morning wore on, a new group of tourists entered the courtyard, led by their guide, Lisa Moore. Among them was Mark Johnson, a 42-year-old tourist, whose loud voice and aggressive stance seemed to demand attention from everyone around him. His presence would soon shatter the morning's peaceful atmosphere and set in motion a chain of events that would remind everyone present about the true meaning of respect and dignity. The stage was set for a confrontation that would go viral, teach an unforgettable lesson, and show the world that some traditions are worth defending, no matter the cost. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next in this incredible true story. Hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads. Trust us, you won't want to miss how this dramatic situation unfolds. As the morning, crowds swelled around Windsor Castle's historic courtyard. Mark Johnson stood out like a splash of neon paint on a classical canvas. His fluorescent green I London t-shirt strained against his substantial frame, while his cargo shorts and leather fanny pack marked him as someone who believed tourist attractions existed purely for his entertainment. At 42, the Dallas real estate agent carried himself with the misplaced confidence of someone who confused wealth with worth. "Hey y'all, watch this." His booming voice, thick with a Texas drawl, cut through the respectful murmur of the crowd like a foghorn through morning mist. He held his latest model smartphone high above his head, its gold case catching the sunlight. "I'm gonna make us all TikTok famous." Several tourists winced at his volume, while others pretended not to notice, a peculiarly British response to social discomfort. Tour guide Lisa Moore, a seasoned professional with 7 years of experience, felt her stomach tighten. She'd seen this type before, tourists who mistook historical sites for theme parks and treated centuries-old traditions like carnival attractions. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a professional bun, and her navy blue uniform bore the castle's official tour guide insignia. She stepped forward, her voice carrying the practiced patience of someone used to managing difficult situations. "Sir, if you could please keep your voice down," she began, but Mark Johnson had already started live streaming to his social media followers, his voice growing even louder as he narrated his surroundings. "Look at this guy, folks." He gestured dramatically toward David Wilson, the royal guard, who remained perfectly still at his post. "Bet you $50 he's actually a robot. They probably charge him up every night right next to the Queen's corgis." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd, but most observers showed visible discomfort. Amy Zhang, the young travel teal vlogger, lowered her camera in second-hand embarrassment. Her perfectly curated Instagram feed would have no room for this kind of disrespect. John Sullivan tightened his grip on his son Tommy's hand, using the moment as a teaching opportunity. "That's not how we behave in places like this," he whispered to the 9-year-old, who nodded solemnly, his eyes still fixed on the guards. Impressive uniform. Karen White, the local teacher, exchanged knowing looks with Stephen Brown, the palace staff member. They'd seen countless tourists come and go, but some stood out for all the wrong reasons. Mark Johnson was quickly proving to be one of them. "Y'all see these fancy medals?" Johnson continued his impromptu performance, edging closer to the guard. His phone was live streaming every moment, comments flooding in from viewers around the world. Probably got 'em from one of them tourist shops down the street. "Hey buddy, how much did they cost? £10? 20? David Wilson remained motionless, his training evident in every muscle that didn't twitch, every breath that remained measured and calm. His steel blue eyes stayed fixed on that invisible point in the distance, though they registered everything in their peripheral vision, including Johnson's increasingly aggressive proximity. Jason Lee, a young tourist from Seattle, had already started recording the scene on his own phone. Something in the air told him this situation was about to escalate, and his social media instincts wouldn't let him miss it. "This isn't going to end well," he muttered to himself, making sure his phone had enough storage space. Mark Johnson's wife, Susan, stood a few feet back, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Mark, honey, maybe we should move on," she suggested, her voice barely audible above her husband's continued commentary. But Mark was too invested in his performance now, feeding off the attention he mistook for appreciation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, spreading his arms wide like a circus ringmaster, "welcome to the greatest show in London. Watch as I, the great Mark Johnson from Dallas, Texas, attempt to make this statue come to life." His voice had taken on a theatrical quality that made several nearby children hide behind their parents. Lisa Moore stepped forward again, her professional demeanor masking her growing concern. "Sir, I must insist," but her words were drowned out by Johnson's continued performance. "Did y'all know," he proclaimed to his live audience, both physical and digital, "that these guards aren't allowed to move? It's like some kind of crazy British magic trick. They just stand there all day, looking all fancy in their little costumes." The crowd had grown larger now, drawn by the spectacle. Some filmed with their phones, others watched with obvious disapproval, and a few seemed uncertain whether to intervene. The morning sun continued to climb higher, casting shorter shadows across the courtyard's ancient stones as the situation teetered on the edge of a profound shift. Robert Harris, the head of security, watched the scene unfold from his position near the castle entrance. His 50 years of life experience, including 2 decades in palace security, told him this situation would require intervention soon. He spoke quietly into his radio, alerting his team to stand by.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
David Wilson, meanwhile, maintained his perfect posture, though his training allowed him to track every movement, every shift in the crowd's energy. Each medal on his chest represented not just personal achievement, but the collective honor of generations of guards who had stood watch over these grounds. Those medals had been earned through service, dedication, and sacrifice. Concepts that seemed entirely lost on the man who now circled him like a cat, toying with what it mistakenly believed to be an inanimate object. The stage was set for a confrontation that would soon explode across social media, teaching an unforgettable lesson about respect, tradition, and the consequences of mistaking patience for weakness. Mark Johnson's moment of infamy was about to begin, and David Wilson's unwavering dedication was about to be tested in ways that would inspire millions. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next in this incredible true story. Hit that notification bell to stay updated on our latest uploads. The next part will show you exactly why you should never mistake a guard's silence for weakness. The tension in Windsor Castle's courtyard rose like a slowly tightening spring. Mark Johnson, emboldened by his growing online audience, began to escalate his performance. His live stream comments were flooding in, some encouraging his behavior, others warning him to back off, but he only seemed to register the ones that fueled his bravado. "Now folks, watch this closely," Johnson announced, his voice carrying an edge of theatrical mischief. He moved even closer to David Wilson, close enough that the guard could detect the scent of morning coffee and tourist-trapped fish and chips on his breath. "I'm going to conduct a scientific experiment. Let's see if these guys are actually human, or if the Queen's got some kind of fancy robots guarding her castle." Lisa Moore, the tour guide, felt her professional composure cracking. She dealt with difficult tourists before, but something about Johnson's demeanor suggested this was different. She caught the eye of Robert Harris, the security chief, who gave her a subtle nod, a silent acknowledgement that he was monitoring the situation. "Sir," Lisa tried again, her voice firm but measured, "I need to remind you that the Queen's Guard are active duty soldiers. This isn't a tourist attraction. It's a military post." But Johnson either didn't hear her or chose to ignore the warning. He turned to his growing audience, both physical and virtual, playing to the cameras with increasing enthusiasm. "Y'all hear that? Active duty soldiers?" He mimicked Lisa's serious tone, drawing a few nervous laughs from the crowd. "Well, I'm an active duty tourist, and I paid good money to see this show." Amy Zhang, the young vlogger, had stopped recording entirely. Her travel channel was about showcasing beauty and respect for different cultures, not whatever this was. She whispered to Jason Lee, who was still filming, "This feels wrong. Someone should stop him." The crowd had grown larger now, forming a semicircle around the scene. John Sullivan had moved his son Tommy back several steps, but the boy's eyes remained fixed on David Wilson, studying how the guard maintained his composure despite the growing harassment. "Dad," Tommy whispered, tugging at his father's sleeve. "Why is that man being so mean?" John Sullivan struggled to find the right words. "Sometimes, son, people forget that just because they can do something doesn't mean they should." Karen White, the local teacher, had pulled out her phone as well, but not to film the spectacle. Her fingers hovered over the palace security, number she'd saved from her many school trips. Something in Johnson's demeanor made her increasingly uneasy. Mark Johnson began a theatrical march in front of the guard, exaggerating his movements in a crude imitation of the ceremonial changing of the guard. His phone captured every step as he played to his online audience. "Look at this, y'all. I'm a fancy British soldier. All I need is one of them big, fluffy hats." His wife Susan had retreated further into the crowd, her face now buried in her hands. Several tourists around her offered sympathetic looks, while others whispered among themselves about the apparent lack of security intervention. David Wilson remained perfectly still, his training evident in every controlled breath. His steel blue eyes stayed locked on their distant focus point, but his other senses were heightened, tracking Johnson's every movement. Years of military service had taught him to read situations, to sense when they were about to pivot from merely uncomfortable to potentially dangerous. The morning sun now cast harsh shadows across the courtyard, adding to the dramatic tension of the scene. Stephen Brown, the palace staff member, had positioned himself closer to the situation, ready to intervene if necessary. His years of experience told him that tourists like Johnson often needed just one small push to cross the line from obnoxious to actionable. "Hey, everyone." Johnson's voice had taken on an even more theatrical quality. "Who wants to see if these medals are real?" He moved closer to David Wilson, his hand hovering dangerously near the guard's chest. "I bet they're just pinned on there like a costume." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, more concerned. Jason Lee's phone captured the rising tension, his social media instincts telling him something significant was about to unfold. Comments on Johnson's live stream began to shift, with more viewers warning him to back off, but he seemed intoxicated by the attention. Robert Harris spoke quietly into his radio again, positioning his security team strategically around the courtyard. Years of experience had taught him to recognize the signs of an impending incident, and every instinct told him this situation was racing toward a flashpoint. Lisa Moore made one final attempt to defuse the situation. "Sir, please, step back from the guard. This is your final warning." Her voice carried an authority that made several tourists step back involuntarily, but Johnson seemed beyond reaching. "Final warning?" He laughed, playing to his audience. "What are they gonna do? These guys can't move. That's their whole thing, right? They're like those guys at Madame Tussauds, except they get paid by the Queen." The air in the courtyard grew thick with tension. Every phone camera was trained on the scene, recording what everyone somehow knew would become a viral moment, though not in the way Mark Johnson imagined. David Wilson's medals gleamed in the late morning sun, each one representing years of service, dedication, and sacrifice. In moments, one of those medals would become the catalyst for a lesson in respect that would echo across social media and beyond. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next in this incredible true story. Hit the notification bell to ensure you don't miss the moment when this tourist's arrogance meets its match. The next part will show you exactly why you should never underestimate a royal guard's patience or their resolve. The moment that would soon explode across social media platforms worldwide unfolded like a slow-motion train wreck. Mark Johnson, his face flushed with the intoxicating combination of attention and misplaced confidence, made the decision that would transform him from an obnoxious tourist into a viral cautionary tale. "Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls," he announced, his voice carrying across the now hushed courtyard, "prepare to witness history." His live stream count had reached over 1,000 viewers, each message of warning drowned out by the excitement of those eagerly anticipating drama. David Wilson, standing perfectly still at his post, detected a slight shift in the crowd's energy. Years of military training had honed his senses to recognize the subtle changes that often preceded conflict. The morning sun caught his medals, just right, making them gleam like beacons against his scarlet tunic. "Y'all want to see something really interesting?" Johnson's hand moved toward the guard's chest, his fingers hovering near a particularly prominent medal. "Let's check if these fancy decorations are just glued on." The crowd's collective intake of breath was audible. Amy Zhang, the young vlogger, found herself unconsciously stepping forward, her instincts telling her to intervene, while Jason Lee's steady hand captured every moment on his phone. Karen White, the local teacher, had already pressed the security number on her phone, her thumb hovering over the call button. "Sir!" Lisa Moore's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Step away from the guard immediately." But her warning came a fraction of a second too late. With a theatrical flourish that would soon be replayed millions of times across the internet, Mark Johnson's fingers closed around the medal on David Wilson's chest. The metal was cool against his fingertips, the ribbon's fabric rich with history and meaning he couldn't begin to comprehend. "Look what we have here!" Johnson's voice carried a note of triumph as he tugged at the medal. "Let's see how real these actually—" The sound of tearing fabric cut through the air like a gunshot. The medal, along with a small piece of the scarlet tunic, came away in Johnson's grasp. The crowd gasped in unified horror as he held it up like a trophy, his live stream camera capturing every second of his monumental mistake. "I got it," he declared, waving the medal above his head. "Look at this, everybody. It just popped right off. These things are just for show, after all." The courtyard fell into a silence so profound that the distant toll of church bells seemed deafening. Susan Johnson had turned away completely, unable to watch what she knew would come next. John Sullivan covered his son Tommy's eyes, though the boy would later say he could feel the change in the air. Robert Harris, the security chief, was already moving through the crowd, his face set in grim determination. But before he could reach the scene, something happened that would become the defining moment of countless social media posts, news articles, and viral videos. David Wilson moved. It wasn't a dramatic movement. There was no sudden violence, no explosive reaction. Instead, with the precision of a clock striking the hour, the guard took one single, deliberate step forward. The sound of his boot on the ancient cobblestones echoed through the silent courtyard like a judge's gavel. Mark Johnson's triumphant grin froze on his face. His live stream captured the exact moment his expression shifted from smug victory to dawning comprehension. The medal in his hand suddenly felt heavier, as if the weight of its significance had finally registered in his mind. "Hey, Johnson's voice had lost its theatrical edge, replaced by a nervous tremor. "It was just a joke, buddy. You know, for the viewers." He gestured weakly at his phone, which was still broadcasting his increasingly pale face to over 2,000 viewers. David Wilson's gaze, which had remained fixed on that distant point throughout all the previous harassment, now locked directly onto Johnson's face. His steel blue eyes carried the weight of centuries of tradition, the dignity of military service, and the quiet strength of disciplined restraint. The crowd, still filming with dozens of phones, watched in anticipation. Jason Lee's steady recording captured the way the morning light seemed to intensify around the guard's uniform, making the remaining medals gleam like warnings. Amy Zhang had finally raised her camera again, knowing that this moment needed to be documented for reasons entirely different from Johnson's initial performance. "The medal," David Wilson spoke, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who never needed to shout to be heard. Each word was precisely measured, delivered with the same discipline that governed every aspect of his duty. Return it, now. The command hung in the air, simple yet absolute. Johnson's livestream comments exploded with viewers telling him to comply, to apologize, to run. But he seemed frozen in place, caught between his fading bravado and growing realization of his mistake. "Listen, man," Johnson attempted to laugh, but it came out as more of a nervous hiccup. "It's not like it's real gold or anything, right? I mean, these are just for tourists, aren't they?" His eyes darted around the crowd, searching for support, finding only stern faces and recording phones. Robert Harris had reached them now, his presence adding another layer of authority to the scene. "Sir," his voice carried the cold precision of someone used to dealing with security threats, "you have exactly 5 seconds to return that medal and vacate the premises. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next in this incredible story of disrespect meeting its consequence. Hit that notification bell to make sure you don't miss the moment when justice is served. The next part will show you exactly why some lines should never be crossed. The atmosphere in Windsor Castle's courtyard crystallized into something almost tangible, a moment when the usual tourist buzz transformed into electric anticipation. Mark Johnson's live stream. Comments were now flooding in so fast they became a blur. Thousands of viewers witnessing his bravado crumbling in real time. David Wilson maintained his new position. That single step forward, having changed everything, his presence seemed to grow larger, filling the courtyard with an authority that made even distant spectators stand straighter. The morning sun cast, his shadow long across the cobblestones, reaching toward Johnson like judgment itself. Johnson's voice had lost all its theatrical flair, reduced to a nervous stammer. The medal in his hand caught the sunlight, its gold surface reflecting his own increasingly pale face. "Look, it's not damaged or anything. I was just trying to make a fun video, you know?" The guard's response came with measured precision, each word carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. "That medal," David Wilson spoke, his voice remaining professionally calm but carrying an edge that made Johnson flinch, "represents service to the crown. It is not a prop for your entertainment." Robert Harris, the security chief, had positioned himself strategically between Johnson and any potential escape route. His decades of experience told him this situation would require careful handling, not just to resolve the immediate conflict, but to send a clear message to future visitors. "The gentleman has given you an order," Harris stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I suggest you comply immediately." His hand rested casually near his radio, a subtle reminder of the additional authority he could summon at a moment's notice. The crowd had grown larger, drawn by the palpable tension. Jason Lee's steady recording captured every nuance of the unfolding scene, while Amy Zhang had switched to live streaming herself, knowing her Travel Channel's followers needed to see this lesson in cultural respect. Susan Johnson had finally gathered the courage to look at the scene again, her face a mask of mortification. "Mark," she hissed, "just give it back and let's go." Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had watched her husband's antics escalate one too many times. Lisa Moore, the tour guide, had moved her other tourists back, creating a clear space around the confrontation. Her years of experience told her this moment would become a story she'd reference in future tours, a cautionary tale about the importance of respecting tradition. John Sullivan used the moment to whisper to his son Tommy, "See how the guard maintains his composure? That's what real strength looks like." The boy nodded solemnly, his young mind processing a lesson more valuable than any history book could provide. Mark Johnson's live stream had now attracted over 5,000 viewers, but their comments had shifted dramatically. The early encouragement of his antics had transformed into a flood of criticism and demands that he show proper respect. His phone shook slightly in his hand as he read the changing tide of public opinion in real time. "Listen," Johnson tried. Again, his voice higher than usual. "I'll just put it back, okay? No harm done, right?" He took a hesitant step forward, but David Wilson's unwavering gaze froze him in place. "Sir," Wilson spoke again, each word precisely chosen, "you will hand the medal to me. You will then leave these grounds. Your disrespect has consequences." The guard's composure remained perfect, but something in his eyes made Johnson swallow hard. Karen White, the local teacher, had begun quietly narrating the scene to her phone's voice recorder. She knew this would become a perfect teaching moment for her future classes about respect, consequences, and the importance of cultural sensitivity. The morning had grown warmer, but Johnson's forehead beaded with cold sweat. His elaborate performance had transformed into something he never intended, a moment of public shame that was being recorded and broadcast from dozens of angles. Stephen Brown, the palace staff member, had already begun preparing the incident report he knew would be required. His experienced eye noted every detail, the exact time, the number of witnesses, the specific medal that had been taken. This would become part of the castle's official records, a testament to both disrespect and dignity. "I didn't." Johnson's voice cracked slightly. I wasn't trying to..." His words trailed off as he realized no explanation could justify his actions. The medal in his hand seemed to grow heavier with each passing second, as if weighted down by the disapproval of every person watching. David Wilson remained motionless again, but this stillness was different from his earlier ceremonial pose. This was the stillness of a soldier ready to act, of authority preparing to assert itself. His silence spoke volumes, carrying messages of duty, honor, and consequences that needed no verbal expression. The crowd's murmurs had taken on a different tone, no longer the excited whispers of spectators anticipating entertainment, but the serious discussions of witnesses to a significant breach of protocol. Phones continued recording, documenting. What everyone present knew would become a viral lesson in respect. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next in this powerful story of actions meeting consequences. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss the moment when justice is served. The next part will show you exactly why respect for tradition should never be taken lightly. The next moments in Windsor Castle's courtyard unfolded with the precision of a well-choreographed dance, though one participant was woefully unrehearsed. David Wilson's training shone through in every calculated movement, every measured word, creating a stark contrast to Mark Johnson's increasingly desperate attempts to salvage his dignity. "Under Section 27 of the Palace Security Act," Robert Harris announced, his voice carrying the full weight of legal authority, "you are in direct violation of protected ceremonial status. The removal or attempted removal of any official military regalia is a serious offense." His words cut through the morning air like a perfectly sharpened blade. Johnson's livestream had now attracted over 10,000 viewers, all watching as the color drained from his face. The comment section had become a tsunami of criticism, with viewers from around the world expressing their disgust at his actions. "I didn't know," Johnson stammered. His earlier bravado completely evaporated. "Nobody told me these were real medals. I thought this was just part of the tourist experience." His voice had taken on a pleading quality that made several onlookers wince in second-hand embarrassment. David Wilson's response was measured, each word delivered with the precision of a military drill. "These medals," he stated, his voice carrying across the now silent courtyard, "represent valor, service, and sacrifice. They are earned through dedication to crown and country, not purchased in gift shops for tourist entertainment." The crowd had grown eerily quiet, hanging on every word. Amy Zhang's travel vlog livestream comments were flooding in with praise for the guards' composure and professionalism. Jason Lee's steady recording captured the way Wilson's remaining medals caught the sunlight, each one a testament to the very honor Johnson had failed to respect. "The medal, sir," Wilson continued, extending his white-gloved hand. "Now." The simple command carried more authority than Johnson's entire morning of theatrical performance. Lisa Moore, the tour guide, had positioned herself near a group of American tourists who had just entered the courtyard. "This," she whispered to them, "is why we emphasize respect for active duty personnel during our welcome briefing." The new arrivals nodded solemnly, their own phones lowered in a show of respect. Susan Johnson had finally pushed through the crowd to stand near her husband. "Mark, for God's sake," she pleaded, "just give it back and let's go. You're making it worse." Her face burned with embarrassment as she realized their vacation photos would now be overshadowed by this moment of infamy. Robert Harris spoke into his radio, his voice low but clear. "Control room, we have a code 27 in the main courtyard. Subject is cooperative, but situation requires documentation." The response crackled back immediately, confirming that additional security personnel were already en route. John Sullivan had lifted his son Tommy onto his shoulders, ensuring the boy could see how true authority handled disrespect. "Remember this, son," he said quietly. "Real power doesn't need to shout." Tommy nodded, his young eyes fixed on David Wilson's unwavering presence. Mark Johnson's hand trembled slightly as he finally extended the medal toward Wilson. "Here," he muttered, trying to inject a note of casualness into his voice and failing miserably. "I was just trying to make people laugh, you know? It was supposed to be funny." David Wilson's white-gloved hands moved with ceremonial precision as he retrieved the medal. Each movement was deliberate, practiced, perfect, a sharp contrast to Johnson's clumsy attempt at showmanship. The guard inspected the medal and the torn fabric with professional thoroughness, his face betraying no emotion. "Sir," Wilson spoke again, his voice carrying the same measured authority, "you will now be escorted from the premises. Your actions have consequences beyond this moment." His words seemed to echo off the ancient castle walls, each syllable weighted with centuries of tradition. Karen White, still recording the scene, whispered into her phone, "And this, future students, is why we respect the institutions that guard our heritage." Her teacher's instincts told her this incident would become a powerful lesson plan about consequences and respect. Stephen Brown had moved closer, his clipboard ready to document every detail. As a senior palace staff member, he knew this incident would require thorough reporting. "Time of retrieval, 11:47 a.m., he noted quietly. "Subject compliant after initial resistance." The morning sun had reached its full strength now, casting sharp shadows across the courtyard. David Wilson's shadow stretched across the cobblestones, reaching toward Johnson like an accusing finger. The tourists who had gathered to watch now stood in respectful silence, many lowering their phones in deference to the dignity of the moment. I'm sorry," Johnson finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The words seemed to cost him more than any souvenir he'd planned to buy on his vacation. His live-stream comments had become a flood of viewers telling him to apologize properly, to show respect, to understand the gravity of his actions. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next in this powerful demonstration of dignity versus disrespect. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss the moment when proper protocol meets proper consequences. The next part will show you exactly why some lessons are worth more than any souvenir. The crowd's reaction rippled through Windsor Castle's courtyard like waves in a human sea. What had begun as a spectator sport had transformed into something far more meaningful, a collective witness to the consequences of disrespecting tradition and honor. "Did you get all that?" a voice called out from the crowd. Jason Lee's steady camera work hadn't missed a moment, and he responded without lowering his phone. "Every second of it. This is going viral for all the right reasons." His social media instincts told him this would be shared not as entertainment, but as education. Amy Zhang's travel vlog livestream had exploded with international viewers, her usual audience of travel enthusiasts now joined by people from around the world, drawn to the unfolding drama. "This," she narrated quietly to her viewers, "is why we always emphasize respecting local customs and traditions in our travel guides." The crowd had begun to voice their collective disapproval of Johnson's actions, their earlier silence giving way to meaningful commentary. "Disgraceful," muttered an elderly British gentleman, his tweed jacket and stern expression marking him as a regular visitor to the castle. "In my day, they'd have arrested him on the spot." Karen White, the local teacher, had positioned herself near a group of teenage tourists. "You see," she explained, seizing the educational moment, "each of those medals tells a story of service and sacrifice. They're not decorations, they're histories written in metal and ribbon." The murmurs grew louder, more pointed. "I hope this goes viral," someone called out. "People need to learn." Another voice added, "My brother's in the military. Those medals mean everything to the people who earn them." Lisa Moore, the tour guide, had gathered her group slightly apart from the main crowd. "This incident," she explained in her professional tone, "will likely become part of our castle's modern history. It demonstrates why we have such strict protocols about respecting our guards." John Sullivan lifted his son Tommy down from his shoulders but kept him close. The boy tugged at his father's sleeve, his young face serious. "Dad, why did that man think it was okay to do that?" The question carried the innocent wisdom of childhood, making several nearby tourists nod in agreement. "Some people, son," John replied, loud enough for those around to hear, "mistake patience for weakness. They forget that true strength often looks like stillness." His words caused several phones to turn his way, capturing what would later become one of the most quoted comments in social media, posts about the incident. Susan Johnson had retreated to the edge of the crowd, her face buried in her hands. A kind-faced elderly woman patted her shoulder sympathetically. "Dear," the woman said, "perhaps this will be a learning experience for him." But Susan just shook her head, knowing this would become another story in a long line of her husband's public misadventures. The crowd's attention shifted as Robert Harris spoke into his radio again. "Subject secured, situation contained, processing for formal documentation." His words carried across the courtyard, prompting a new wave of comments and reactions from the assembled tourists. "Post it everywhere!" someone shouted, their phone held high. "Let everyone see what happens when you disrespect tradition." The sentiment was echoed by dozens of voices, phones raised like torches of modern justice. Amy Zhang's livestream comments had taken on a life of their own. Viewers from military families shared stories about what medals meant to their loved ones. Veterans posted about the years of service each decoration represented. The incident had transformed from a tourist's foolish prank into a global conversation about respect and honor. "I served 20 years, a voice called out from the crowd. An older man in a veteran's cap stepped forward, his face stern but composed. Each of those medals tells a story of sacrifice, of duty, of loss. They're not props for your social media entertainment." The crowd parted respectfully for the veteran, many lowering their phones as he approached David Wilson. The guard remained at attention, but there was a subtle acknowledgement between the two men, a shared understanding of service and sacrifice that needed no words. Jason Lee's video had already begun circulating on social media platforms, shared, with captions about respect, consequences, and the importance of understanding cultural and military traditions. Comments poured in from around the world, many from service members and their families, all emphasizing the significance of military honors. "This isn't just about one tourist's bad behavior," Karen White explained to her impromptu audience of students and visitors. "It's about understanding that some things in this world deserve our respect, even if we don't fully understand their significance." The morning sun had reached its zenith, casting no shadows now, as if nature itself wanted. Every detail of the scene illuminated. The crowd's energy had transformed from mere spectators to active participants in a moment of social justice, their phones recording not just an incident, but a lesson for future generations. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next in this powerful moment of public accountability. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss how social media transforms a tourist's mistake into a global lesson about respect. The next part will show you exactly how the court of public opinion delivers its verdict. The weight of public disapproval finally seemed to crack Mark Johnson's facade of bravado. Standing in the bright midday sun of Windsor Castle's courtyard, his fluorescent green I London shirt now seemed less like a tourist's celebration and more like a target, drawing all eyes to his moment of shame. "I didn't," he started, his voice having lost all its earlier theatrical projection. "This wasn't supposed to." The words died in his throat as he watched his live-stream comments transform into a waterfall of condemnation. His phone, still broadcasting, shook visibly in his hand. David Wilson stood resolute, the retrieved medal now safely in his white-gloved hand. His presence seemed to have grown even more commanding, though he hadn't moved an inch since retrieving the medal. The scarlet of his uniform appeared more vibrant against Johnson's increasingly pale complexion. "Sir," Robert Harris interjected, his tone carrying the weight of decades of security experience, "we'll need you to provide your details for the official record." He produced a formal-looking document, the castle's letterhead clearly visible. At the top, "This incident will be logged in the Permanent Visitor Violation Database." The word "permanent" seemed to hit Johnson like a physical blow. His eyes widened as the full implications began to sink in. "Database?" he stammered, his Texas drawl now tinged with genuine fear. "You mean like a record? This isn't going on my record, is it?" Susan Johnson had finally found her voice. "A record?" she hissed at her husband. "Mark, do you realize what this could mean for your real estate license? For your broker status?" Each question landed like another nail in the coffin of his social media ambitions. The crowd's murmurs grew more pointed, more deliberate. Jason Lee's steady recording captured Johnson's transformation from self-appointed entertainer to cautionary tale. "Already at 50,000 views," he announced to no one in particular, "and it's being shared by military family support groups." Amy Zhang's travel vlog had switched to educational mode. "This is why research and respect are the two most important aspects of international travel," she explained to her viewers. "Every country has its traditions, its symbols of honor. It's not our place to turn them into entertainment." Lisa Moore, the tour guide, had begun using the incident as an impromptu teaching moment for her group. "The Queen's Guard aren't ceremonial figurines," she explained, her voice carrying clearly. "They're elite soldiers with extensive combat training. Their stillness is a choice, not a limitation." The veteran who had spoken earlier stepped forward again, his decorated cap catching the sunlight. "Son," he addressed Johnson directly, "do you know what that medal you tried to take represents?" He didn't wait for an answer. "It's the Operational Service Medal. Men and women die earning those. They're not souvenirs." Johnson's face, already pale, took on an almost greenish tinge. His live stream, which had begun as his attempt at viral fame, had indeed gone viral. but as a lesson in what not to do. Comments poured in from around the world, many from service members and their families, each one adding to the weight of his shame. Johnson's voice cracked. I just wanted to make a funny video. Everything's content these days, right? It was supposed to be entertaining. The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. His social media dreams crumbling in real time. Karen White, still recording for her future lessons, narrated quietly, and here we see the moment when consequences meet actions. When social media fame meets social responsibility. Several nearby tourists nodded in agreement, their own phones capturing Johnson's very public education. John Sullivan used the moment to continue his son's impromptu life lesson. Tommy, he said loud enough for those nearby to hear, remember this. In an age where everything's filmed, make sure you're always on the right side of the camera. The boy nodded solemnly, his young face understanding more than his years might suggest. Robert Harris continued his official documentation, each scratch of his pen against paper making Johnson flinch. Time of incident, duration of violation, nature of disrespect to Crown property, he listed methodically. This will be shared with all royal palaces and military installations in the UK. The realization seemed to hit Johnson in waves. First came the understanding that his content had backfired spectacularly. Then the dawning horror that this would live forever on the internet. Finally, the crushing recognition that his actions might have real-world consequences beyond social media infamy. Please, he tried again, his voice barely above a whisper. I'll delete the live stream. I'll post an apology. But his words trailed off as he realized no simple social media fix could undo what he'd done. The medal, now safely back in David Wilson's possession, seemed to gleam accusingly in the midday sun. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see what happens next in this story of social media ambition meeting real-world consequences. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss the moment when digital fame transforms into lasting infamy. The next part will show you exactly why some mistakes can't be edited out. David Wilson's movements, as he prepared to restore the medal to his uniform, carried the weight of centuries of military tradition. Each gesture was measured, precise, and purposeful. A stark contrast to the chaotic energy that had preceded this moment in Windsor Castle's courtyard. Before this medal is restored, Wilson spoke, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had silenced Johnson's bluster. There is a matter of protocol to be observed. His words drew the crowd into complete silence, phones still raised, but their owners barely breathing. Robert Harris nodded, understanding the significance of what was to come. For the record, he announced, his official tone echoing across the courtyard, we are now documenting the formal restoration of a military honor under Section 15 of the Military Decorations Protection Act. Mark Johnson stood rooted to the spot, his live stream still running, but forgotten in his trembling hand. The comments had become a blur of criticism and condemnation, but his attention was fixed on the ceremony unfolding before him. This medal, Wilson continued, holding it up for all to see, represents not just personal achievement, but the collective honor of the regiment. Its restoration must reflect that dignity. His voice carried no anger, no resentment, only the solemn weight of tradition. Lisa Moore, recognizing the historical significance of the moment, began quietly explaining to her tour group. What you're about to witness, she whispered, is a rarely seen ceremony. The formal restoration of a military decoration is steeped in centuries of tradition. The veteran in the crowd stepped forward again, removing his cap in respect. Others, sensing the gravity of the moment, followed suit. A ripple of reverence spread through the assembled tourists, phones lowered to waist level out of instinctive deference. Stephen Brown, the palace staff member, produced a small velvet cushion from a nearby guard station. "For the formal restoration, sir," he offered to Wilson, his movements equally ceremonial. The cushion, deep royal blue with gold tassels, served as a temporary resting place for the medal. David Wilson placed the medal on the cushion with precise movements. "In accordance with military tradition," he announced, "a dishonor decoration must be properly cleansed before restoration." From his pocket, he produced a small, pristine white cloth. The crowd watched in hushed amazement as Wilson began to carefully polish the medal. Each movement was deliberate, almost hypnotic in its precision. The sun caught the metal's surface, creating flashes of light that seemed to underscore the solemnity of the moment. Amy Zhang's livestream comments had transformed from outrage to awe. "This," she narrated quietly, "is how tradition transforms a moment of disrespect into one of renewed honor." Her viewers responded with virtual silence, broken only by occasional messages of respect and appreciation. John Sullivan lifted his son Tommy onto his shoulders again, ensuring the boy could see every detail. "Watch carefully, son," he whispered. "This is what respect looks like." Tommy nodded, his young face solemn with understanding. As Wilson completed the cleaning, Robert Harris stepped forward with an official-looking document. "For the permanent record," he stated, "we must document the restoration. Mr. Johnson, you will sign as witness to this ceremony." Johnson's signature, when it came, was shaky and uncertain, a far cry from the bold flourishes he'd probably imagined using for autographs in his social media dreams. His wife Susan watched with a mixture of embarrassment and relief, knowing this ceremony was actually a mercy, a chance for some small redemption. "The medal will now be restored," Wilson announced, lifting it from the cushion. The sun caught it perfectly, sending a flash of light across the courtyard like a ceremonial. "Salute." His movements, as he reattached it to his uniform, were precise and reverent. Karen White's recording captured the subtle sound of the medal being secured, a small click that seemed to echo with finality. "And with that sound," she whispered into her phone, "honor is restored." The veteran in the crowd stood at attention, a gesture quickly mimicked by other former service members present. Their spontaneous show of respect added another layer of solemnity to the ceremony. Jason Lee's video captured the transformation of the moment, how a potential social media circus had become a powerful lesson in dignity and tradition. His steady hands recorded Wilson adjusting his uniform one final time, ensuring everything was exactly as it should be. "Let this serve," Wilson spoke, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard, "as a reminder that some traditions transcend entertainment. Some honors must remain sacred." His words seemed to hang in the air, carrying the weight of both history and warning. Don't forget to like and subscribe to witness more powerful moments where tradition meets modern life. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss how dignity can transform even the darkest moments into lessons of honor. The next part will reveal the lasting impact of this solemn ceremony. Robert Harris stepped forward, his presence now commanding the full attention of everyone in Windsor Castle's courtyard. The restoration ceremony complete, it was time for official consequences to be administered. His black suit and security badge seemed to absorb the sunlight, creating an aura of authoritative gravity. "Mr. Johnson," he began, his voice carrying the weight of institutional authority, "under the Powers of Protection Act, I am required to inform you of the following." He produced an official document, its gold letterhead gleaming in the midday sun. This incident will have several immediate and lasting consequences. Mark Johnson's livestream was still running, though he seemed to have forgotten about it entirely. His viewers watched as all pretense of social media bravado drained, from his face, replaced by the stark realization of real-world consequences. First, Harris continued, reading from the document with methodical precision. You are hereby permanently banned from all royal properties and military installations within the United Kingdom. This includes, but is not limited to, all palaces, castles, ceremonial grounds, and military museums. The crowd's murmur grew as the severity of the punishment became clear. Amy Zhang, still live streaming, provided quiet commentary. This is unprecedented access to an official sanctions procedure. My viewers are witnessing real consequences for disrespecting military honors. Second, Harris pressed on, each word measured and clear. Your actions today will be recorded in the International Tourist Incident Database, accessible to cultural sites and institutions worldwide. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Many historical sites and museums consult this database when processing visitor applications. Susan Johnson's sharp intake of breath was audible. Their planned European tour, with its carefully scheduled visits to historical sites, was effectively over before it had properly begun. Her husband's attempt at social media fame had just cost them access to centuries of cultural heritage. Lisa Moore used the moment to educate her tour group. The International Tourist Incident Database, she explained quietly, was established to protect historical sites and cultural institutions from precisely this kind of disrespectful behavior. It's rarely invoked, but when it is, the consequences are severe. Third, Harris continued, his voice unwavering, you will be required to complete a formal cultural sensitivity and military respect course before any appeal can be considered. This course, Mr. Johnson, is neither brief nor inexpensive. He paused again, fixing Johnson with a stern gaze. It includes extensive study of military traditions and the significance of military honors. The veteran in the crowd nodded approvingly, his decorated cap catching the sunlight. Several other tourists with military connections murmured their agreement. This was no mere slap on the wrist, but a genuine attempt at education and reform. Fourth, Harris pressed on, you will be required to make a formal written apology, which will be posted at guard stations throughout the royal properties. He gestured to Stephen Brown, who produced another document. This apology will serve as a warning to others who might consider similar actions. Jason Lee's steady recording captured Johnson's visible wilt with each new consequence. The man, who had strutted into the courtyard, seeking social media fame, now seemed to be physically shrinking under the weight of official censure. Finally, Harris concluded, you will be escorted from the premises immediately. Your tour passes are hereby revoked, and any prepaid admissions to royal properties will be forfeited. He closed the official document with a crisp movement. Do you understand these consequences, Mr. Johnson? Johnson's response was barely audible, a far cry from his earlier theatrical projections. Yes, sir, he mumbled, his eyes fixed on the cobblestones. His phone, still live streaming, captured every moment of his humiliation for his now massive audience. Karen White's recording caught the subtle reactions of the crowd, the nods of approval, the satisfied expressions, the sense that justice was being properly served. This, she whispered into her phone, is how institutions protect their heritage and honor. John Sullivan used the moment for one final lesson to his son, Tommy. See how actions have real consequences, he said, loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. Social media fame lasts a moment, but respect or disrespect lasts a lifetime. David Wilson remained at his post, his restored medal gleaming in the sunlight, a silent testament to the power of tradition and the importance of respect. His presence seemed to underscore every word of Harris's official pronouncement. Don't forget to like and subscribe to witness more powerful moments of justice and consequence. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss how authority and tradition work together to protect what's sacred. The next part will show you the final moments of this cautionary tale. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds of phones and thousands of live stream viewers, Mark Johnson's inglorious exit from Windsor Castle began to unfold. The man who had entered seeking viral fame was about to achieve it, though not in the way he had imagined. "This way, sir," Robert Harris directed, his tone professional but unyielding. 2 additional security officers had materialized, their presence making it clear this wasn't a casual suggestion. "We'll need to process your paperwork before you leave the premises." Johnson's livestream count had swelled to over 50,000 viewers, but he barely noticed. His phone hung limply in his hand, broadcasting his walk of shame to an audience that had transformed from potential fans into appalled witnesses. "Mark," Susan Johnson whispered urgently, tugging at her husband's arm, "just walk. Please, let's just walk." Her face burned with embarrassment as she tried to shield him from the forest of recording phones. Their dream vacation had become a documentary about how not to behave abroad. Lisa Moore gathered her tour group closer, speaking in clear, measured tones. "What we're witnessing," she explained, "is standard protocol for severe violations of royal property rules. This incident will become part of our tour's cultural awareness briefing." The crowd parted to create a path, their phones tracking Johnson's every step. Amy Zhang's live stream captured the moment in high definition, her travel vlog audience growing by the thousands. "Notice how professionally the situation is being handled," she narrated. "This is British institutional efficiency at its finest." David Wilson remained at his post, his restored medal catching the sunlight as Johnson was led past him. For a brief moment, their eyes met, the guard's steady, dignified gaze meeting the tourists' shame-filled glance. No words were exchanged, but volumes were spoken in that silent moment. "Dad," Tommy Sullivan tugged at his father's sleeve. "Why does he look so sad now? He was laughing before." John Sullivan knelt beside his son, using the moment as a final and teaching opportunity. "Sometimes, son, people laugh until they realize their jokes hurt more than just themselves." Karen White's recording captured the subtle sounds of the moment. The shuffle of Johnson's feet on ancient cobblestones, the murmur of the crowd, the distant toll of chapel bells marking the hour. "The sound of consequences," she whispered, into her phone, has its own unique rhythm. Stephen Brown was already updating the official incident log, his pen moving swiftly across the paper. "Time of removal, 12:45 p.m., he noted. "Subject compliant during escort, full documentation package. Prepared for database entry." As they approached the castle's exit, Robert Harris paused to address the crowd one final time. "Thank you for your cooperation during this incident," he announced. "We request that any footage be shared responsibly, with appropriate context about the seriousness of military honors." Jason Lee's steady recording caught Johnson's slight stumble as reality continued to sink in. "Already trending," he muttered, checking his phone's notifications. "Every major military family group is sharing it. This is going beyond viral. It's becoming a movement." The veteran in the crowd stepped forward one last time, his decorated cap now held respectfully against his chest. "Remember this, young man," he called out to Johnson's retreating form. "Those medals tell stories written in blood and sacrifice. They're not props for your entertainment." Susan Johnson's attempts to shield her husband from the cameras had transformed into quiet fury. "I told you," she hissed, just loud enough for nearby phones to catch. "I told you this wasn't Disneyland. But you never listen, do you, Mark? You never listen." The crowd's energy had shifted from initial shock to satisfied resolution. Comments on various live streams reflected a sense of justice served, of tradition upheld, of respect restored. The incident was already being shared across platforms with captions about cultural sensitivity and military honor. Amy Zhang's travel vlog had gained thousands of new followers during the incident. "This will become a case study," she explained to her viewers, in why research and respect are the two most crucial elements of international travel. As Johnson approached the final security checkpoint, Robert Harris produced one last document. "Your final signature is required," he stated, "acknowledging receipt of your ban notification and understanding of appeal procedures." The paper seemed to weigh a ton in Johnson's trembling hands. The sun had reached its highest point, casting no shadows as Johnson signed the document. His signature, once practiced for anticipated autograph sessions, now marked his admission of guilt and acceptance of consequences. Don't forget to like and subscribe to witness more powerful moments of justice served and lessons learned. Hit that notification bell to ensure you don't miss the final part of this cautionary tale about respect, tradition, and the price of social media fame. The next and final part will reveal the lasting impact of this incident on both the participants and the watching world. The aftermath of what would become known as the Windsor Guard incident spread across social media like wildfire. Within hours of Mark Johnson's humiliating exit from Windsor Castle, the story had taken on a life of its own, transforming from a tourist's misguided bid for fame into a powerful lesson about respect, tradition, and consequences. Jason Lee's video, professionally edited and posted with a thoughtful caption about military honor, reached 10 million views within the first day. "Tourist learns hard lesson about respecting military honors" became the top trending topic across multiple platforms. Comments flooded in from service members, military families, and citizens worldwide, each adding their voice to the conversation about respect and tradition. Amy Zhang's travel vlog episode, titled "Why Research Matters: A Lesson in Cultural Respect," became her most watched content ever. "This incident," she explained to her expanded audience, "reminds us that we're not just tourists, we're representatives of our own cultures visiting someone else's sacred spaces." The footage of David Wilson's dignified handling of the situation became a training video for military personnel worldwide. His measured response, perfect composure, and professional restoration ceremony exemplified the highest standards of military bearing under provocation. Back in Texas, Mark Johnson's real estate office received hundreds of calls and messages. His attempted social media stunt had backfired spectacularly, leading to a public apology and temporary leave of absence. The incident served as a stark reminder that in an interconnected world, local actions can have global consequences. Windsor Castle incorporated the incident into its official visitor orientation program. Lisa Moore and other tour guides now use it as a powerful example of why protocols exist and how seriously they're enforced. "Remember the Guard incident" became a shorthand reminder for tourists about the importance of respecting military traditions. Karen White's classroom lesson plan about the incident won an educational award for cultural sensitivity training. "Sometimes," she told her students, "the most powerful lessons come from watching someone else's mistakes." The veteran who spoke up during the incident was later identified as Colonel James McCarthy, retired. His impromptu speech about the meaning of military medals was transcribed and shared widely among service academies as a reminder of the weight of tradition they carry. But perhaps the most lasting impact came from young Tommy Sullivan. His school essay about that day, titled "Why We Respect the Guard," went viral in its own right. "I learned that being still can be stronger than moving," he wrote, "and that some things are too important to be jokes." The incident sparked a broader conversation about social media culture and the pursuit of viral fame at any cost. Discussions arose about the intersection of ancient traditions and modern technology, about respect in an age of instant content, about the true price of fleeting internet celebrity. David Wilson continued his duties at Windsor Castle, his restored medal gleaming as brightly as ever. Tourists now often pause to salute him respectfully, understanding better than ever the honor and tradition he represents, his silent dignity. That day spoke volumes about the values that survive in an increasingly noisy world. Up next, we've got two more incredible stories that you won't want to miss. Tourist tries to make Royal Horse Guard laugh, gets more than he bargained for. Watch how another tourist's attempt at humor leads to an unexpected lesson in military discipline and tradition. Disrespectful visitor learns why you never touch the Queen's Guard's rifle. Discover what happens when a social media prankster crosses the line with a guardian of royal tradition. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful stories about respect, tradition, and justice served. Hit that notification bell to never miss an upload. Your support helps us bring these important lessons to light. The Windsor Guard incident remains a testament to the enduring power of tradition over trending topics, of dignity over viral fame, of lasting honor over momentary attention. In an age where everything is content, some things remain sacred.